I first want to bring up Rusty, and Rusty's going to talk about his perspective for where the MRF industry is going and how we can implement some of these technologies into the industry. So Rusty, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dave. I always love following a scientist because I learned something, you know, and when you said that PFAS was in this anti-wrinkle shirt, I was like, I'm going to try that on my face and see if I can get that to work a little bit. So the title of my presentation is The Dramatic Shift in MRF Design, and I'm a sales guy, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not really going to dive deep into the actual designs itself, but I am going to talk about the shift that has happened in the marketplace, especially over certainly the last 10 years, but definitely in the last 2 years for sure. And it's really a perfect storm, and all of these things have sort of come together to take us down this road that we've been going down the last couple of years. I didn't realize that this was going to be a game show oriented session, but I guess maybe I should have retitled mine The Price is Right, because the price of MRFs has just skyrocketed over the last few years, and that's kind of what I want to focus on here. But you know, everybody in this room, you know, unless you've been living under a rock since 2013, 2017, everybody's heard of green fence and you know, the China sword. And without going too deep into that, basically that was the sort of the first step that started driving the marketplace into waking up and realizing that we've got to produce a little bit better quality, primarily fiber, but also plastics as well, because China pretty much said, we're not going to be the world's trash can anymore. You have to stop sending this highly contaminated material. They were breaking bales and getting 30 and 40% contamination in them. And so they said stop. And so what that immediately did was all that supply remained here domestically, and those people that had that material had to make a decision. Are we going to invest in the infrastructure of our MRF to try to produce better quality commodities? Or exactly how we're going to address that. So back around 2013, 14, 15, we started seeing instantaneous calls for doing upgrades to MRFs, buying more automation, buying optical sorters to be able to make a better grade of commodities going forward. Then the other thing that happened, and I'll talk about this one a little bit more, is there was a shift, because for the longest time contracts were sort of based on commodity values, and there was a period of time when if you were a MRF processor, you were actually paying the municipality to bring you their tons. Of course, those days are long gone. And then obviously COVID, we'll talk about that a little bit too. So the contractual change that kind of happened a few years ago, and it's I think most of those older contracts are pretty much gone now. The newer contracts are more processing fee based, more processing fee oriented. I talked to a couple of the experts in the industry and got these numbers. In 2013, the average processing fee in the Southeast was around $40, and then last year the average was around $100. I actually spoke to one of the experts this morning about it, and he said that a test was done by or a survey was done by Raftalus, if you guys know who they are, in 2022, and they said that the average in Florida anyway was more like $135 to $140 a ton. So the significance of that is if you go from a $40 a ton processing fee to a $100 a ton processing fee, for a MRF that processes 30,000 tons a year, that is basically an additional $3 million of capital that you've got coming in that you can then invest in that MRF infrastructure. So if it's a 7-year contract or if it's a 10-year contract, for example, that's $30 million that you've now got. Now, obviously not 100% of that went into MRF infrastructure, but a lot of it did. Another thing that happened, and this one was interesting, I didn't even think about this, one of our processors told us this, and just one example. If you're a hauler and you've budgeted, $300,000 a truck, you've decided you've set aside $15 million to buy 50 trucks, and then all of a sudden, boom, COVID hits. Everybody knows about the supply chain issues. Everybody knows about, workers stopped, manufacturing stopped. They couldn't get those 50 trucks. They could only get 10 of them delivered because they had everybody. If you've been in this business, you know that getting trucks over the last couple of years has been a challenge. And so when you've budgeted $15 million to buy trucks and you can only buy, a couple of $1 million worth of trucks, now all of a sudden there's $12 million of capital sitting there that's budgeted that you really can't spend, and a lot of that got spent in MRF equipment, fortunately, and I'm not arguing with any of that. I think it's a great thing, but that is a sort of a phenomenon that happened that helped shift some of that into the MRFs. Another thing that happened is, everybody's heard of the Amazon effect, right? So Browns have gotten smaller. If you're collecting OCC used to be big. OCC screen spacing used to be big. But when Amazon came out, boxes started getting smaller and smaller. There's now boxes inside of boxes and sometimes inside of boxes when you get stuff from Amazon, and so it's made Brown smaller. Well, this is really the other Amazon effect that I wanted to talk about. And what that is that Amazon really brought to the marketplace a pretty significant change in wages across the board. When you start seeing, McDonald's and Taco Bell offering signing bonuses for people to come work there, I'll be the first to admit I made like $500 one day because I went and filled out 10 applications at McDonald's and got $50, for each one of them. So it really put a tremendous amount of pressure on the MRFs just to try to be competitive in paying their sorters. We had one of our customers in the Northeast that said they used to factor in, when they did their pro formas on sorters, they used to use $28,000 a year per sorter. Now they're using $55,000 per year per sorter. Some of the consultants that we talk to in the industry, when we ask them for those kind of numbers, they're using $75,000 a year per sorter. Now, obviously, that's going to change across the country, right? If you're in California, we have some customers that pay their sorters $100,000 a year, but you're not going to get that in Georgia or North Carolina or even some of the places in the Northeast. But a typical average is somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 a year per sorter, and so that adds up. And so when the price per sorter goes up, that's going to give companies incentive to invest in automation to reduce the amount of sorters they have working at their MRF. And then the reason I call it the other Amazon effect is, if you don't know, Amazon for a while, and they may still be doing it, I'm not sure, I haven't kept up with it, but they were offering drivers $10,000 basically. They were saying, okay, if you want to set up your business, here's 10 grand, you can come, you can buy a van, you can get in your own business. And so this was driving a lot of that type of incentive, and it makes it difficult for MRFs that are paying, $10, $12, $13 an hour to stay competitive, because why would somebody come work in a very difficult, very challenging environment when they can go out in the marketplace and get those kind of wages? So that kind of competition has affected the MRFs. The machines, of course, have been a huge increase. This is a 10-year average, both on optical sorters and robots. This is just our data. This is not all of our competitors, although I did call them. None of them returned my phone call to tell me how many optics and robots they had sold. But we have seen in 2012 and 2017, the number of optics we sold on an annual basis was reasonably flat. We had a little bit of increase. It was about 15-18% increase. Since 2017, however, there's been a 210% increase in the number of optical sorters that we have sold, which is very telling. And then on the robot side, that pretty much goes without saying, because in 2017 we didn't even sell robots, but there's been about a 700% increase in the number of robots that we've sold over that same period of time. So what's happened to the overall price of these systems over the last 10 years is it has jumped dramatically. And what this graph shows is it shows the average price in blue per system, and then the number of systems that we sold in a given year in red. And you'll notice that the number of systems that we're selling annually, this does not include individual products like a baler or a compactor or a conveyor. It's a MRF of at least 10 tons an hour or more. We counted in this survey. And you can see that the number of systems that we've sold has remained relatively flat. And in fact, in 2012 to 2017, the average cost of that MRF was almost identical between 2012 and 2017. We jumped to 2022, and that number quadrupled in terms of the average cost of MRF, per MRF. And that was because of the automation. So we have a customer that had bought a MRF from us in 2013. It was a 55-ton-an-hour MRF, had 6 optical sorters in it. The entire facility only had 6 optical sorters. They had 34 people, 34 to 36, depending on the quality of fiber they wanted to make. They were getting about 93% recovery rate, and they spent $19 million on that MRF. At that time, that was one of the bigger MRFs that we had ever sold, and really one of the bigger MRFs in the Midwest. In 22, the same customer came back, virtually same size MRF, 56 tons per hour, but they've gone to 19 optical sorters in that design versus 6 just 10 years ago. So pretty significant jump in the number of optics. Originally, they only had 3 cleaning fiber. In this new MRF, they're going to have 9 optical sorters cleaning fiber, which is a significant, jump. They're only going to have 10 to 12, maybe 14 sorters working on that line, and they're getting 96% recovery rate versus 93%. And in addition to getting 96% of the material, they're going to have 96% purity. So they are in effect using optical sorters to QC optical sorters. So it's a multiple step process where they're trying to get as many people out of there as possible. And out of those 10 sorters, the vast majority of those are going to be on the pre-sort, because that's kind of the most challenging area to eliminate sorters. We are working with some customers now that have been working for a couple of years to go after a 0 sorter design. They want to develop a design. We've been working with, there's all kinds of devices out there on the marketplace. There's auger screens that we've heard about. There's trommels, these different types of things. And we're trying to get this to a 0 sorter. It's tough, frankly, to get there because of the pre-sort and everything that's there, but that's where the industry is going. If we can get this down to 0 sorters or 1 sorter or 2 sorter in the entire facility, then it drives automation, and obviously it's going to help control a lot of other factors. It's not just wages, right? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into hiring people. You've got workers' compensation. You've got safety factors with people, running around up on the platform and possibly getting hurt, and then there's lawsuits. There's all kinds of things that you can avoid by having automation. But that's led to this explosion that we've seen. So what's kind of the conclusion here? So it's not just one thing that we can say has really driven this this price hike on the MRFs. It's a variety of factors. One is there's more automation. I just mentioned that. There's more optical sorters. There's more robots in the design. There's more vision systems in the design. We're doing an installation over in the UK right now where I think we've got about 18, 19 optical sorters and about 8 or 9 robots, and then we've got about 8 or 9 vision systems in there. And if you guys aren't familiar with a vision system is in effect a robot without the arm. It's just over the belt. It's acquiring data. And what that data does is it sort of gives that operator some feedback. Now, where I think this is heading long term is that data is then going to be able to fed back automatically into the upstream equipment, make adjustments to belt speeds and how optics are working and that kind of thing. But for now, it's just data acquisition for the operator, so that operator can look at that data and analyze it and then manually interact with that equipment to make adjustments to speeds or screen angles or whatever it happens to be to make the MRF run a little bit better. But we are definitely seeing significant jump in automation going in these designs. But not just more automation, but having more automation also improves the quality of the material that is being put out, because we all know the issues that we've seen with contamination. Contamination rates 15, 20 years ago were sometimes in the single digits, 10, 12%, 15% was not uncommon. Now we're hearing 25, 30, 40% contamination. That's a challenge. So we need automation to help overcome some of that. It's also improving the recovery. Every pound that we keep out of the landfill, this guy's life dream right here is to eliminate landfill, so every pound that we can keep out of the landfill makes his dream that much more real. And it reduces the manpower. I don't think anybody's real desire is to eliminate jobs. Nobody sets out to eliminate jobs, but the marketplace sort of dictates that's kind of what you have to do, though, because the marketplace is cannibalizing itself with the wages. And so we've got to have the automation in there because we're in business to make money, right? I mean, if you're not making profit, you're not going to stay in business. So just what it is. Steel prices jumped significantly the last couple of years. That has leveled somewhat for sure, but anybody that buys steels, anybody that buys trucks, anybody that has bought compactors or compactor cans, anything that's made out of steel, you know that the price of steel has jumped dramatically, and that's added to some of this as well. Labor rates have increased. We mentioned it earlier because of the fact that there's so much more competitive labor rates in the marketplace. It's driving the cost of sorters up. But also when we do installations, that costs more money. When there's electrical wiring, a lot of people don't realize how much goes into installing a big MRF. But for example, one thing I didn't even list on here was freight. Some of our MRFs are 100, 120, 130 truckloads of material going down the road. And when you start factoring in an extra $1 or $2 per gallon of gas over 100 trucks that are traveling 2,000 miles, it adds up pretty quickly. So there's a lot of these factors that have gone into the price of these MRFs going up, and the days of the $6, $8, $10 million MRF are gone. I mean, you can do a $6 or $8 million MRF, but it's going to be a little baby MRF that can do 5, 7, 8 tons an hour. These bigger MRFs, we're seeing more and more MRFs that are 25, 35, 40, even 50 tons an hour, and these MRFs are starting to jump in the 20, 25, $30 million range and higher. So that $7, $8 million MRF is kind of gone. But it's all been with its benefits as well too. I mean, like I said, improved quality, improved recovery, reduced manpower. I think it's good for the industry. It's certainly been good for me. So I'm happy to be a part of that as well. So I think that's all I've got. Yep, that's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like everything else, technology is kind of getting into different sectors and stuff like. I never thought I'd check out my own groceries at Walmart, but apparently that's happening. So I'm gonna bring Scott. We're gonna do questions at the end, but by all means, if